Marcus Allen, a 32-year-old marketing executive, boarded Flight 746 from New York to Los Angeles. He was excited about this trip, not only because he had a crucial business meeting, but also because it was his first time flying first class. He had finally treated himself to the luxury. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, Marcus walked confidently down the aisle, his boarding pass in hand, scanning for seat 3A. The flight was nearly full, with passengers already settling in. As he reached his seat, he placed his carry-on in the overhead compartment and sat down, exhaling deeply. Just as he was adjusting his seatbelt, a flight attendant named Heather Collins walked up to him. She had platinum blonde hair tied in a tight bun and an air of authority around her. She glanced at him, then at the seat. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong seat," she said, her tone sharp. Marcus furrowed his brows. "No, ma'am, this is my assigned seat," he said politely, showing his boarding pass. Heather barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "Sir, this section is reserved for first-class passengers." Marcus was taken aback. "I am a first-class passenger." Heather's eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms. "Sir, please move to economy. I don't want to cause a scene." Passengers nearby began to take notice. Some exchanged glances, while others turned their heads, sensing tension. Marcus remained calm. "There must be a misunderstanding. I paid for this seat." Heather huffed. "Sir, if you don't comply, I will have to call security." By now, whispers spread through the cabin. A middle-aged woman in seat 3B, a well-dressed businesswoman, frowned and spoke up. "Ma'am, I saw him sitting here first. He belongs here," she said. Heather ignored her. "Sir, please don't make this difficult. I need you to move now." Marcus clenched his jaw. He had experienced racial discrimination before, but not like this. He inhaled deeply, determined not to lose his composure. "I'm not moving," Marcus said firmly. "This is my seat. If you think otherwise, check your system." Heather's face turned red. She turned to another flight attendant, Lisa, who had just approached. "He's refusing to move!" Heather snapped. Lisa looked confused. "What? Why should he move?" Heather groaned. "Because he clearly doesn't belong in first class." At that moment, the entire cabin went silent. Passengers gasped and some shook their heads in disbelief. Lisa's eyes widened in shock. "Heather, what are you saying?" Heather folded her arms. "I'm just saying it's clear he—" Before she could finish, a deep, authoritative voice interrupted. A man in a dark blue suit had been watching the entire exchange. He stood up from seat 2C and stepped forward. "Heather," the man said, his voice calm but firm. Heather turned to him. "Yes, Mr. Dawson." James Dawson was the regional director of the airline. He was on the flight, traveling discreetly to evaluate the crew's performance. "I've seen enough," Dawson said. "Mr. Allen, I apologize for this unacceptable behavior." Heather swallowed. "But sir, I was just—" Dawson raised his hand. "Heather, follow me, now!" Heather hesitated, glancing around, realizing that passengers were recording. Some had their phones out, capturing the entire scene. "Now, Heather!" Dawson repeated, his voice sharper. She reluctantly followed him to the galley, her face pale. Passengers murmured as she disappeared. A few moments later, Dawson returned alone. He faced the passengers and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to sincerely apologize for what just happened. That behavior does not reflect our airline's values." He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Allen, I deeply regret this incident. Rest assured, appropriate action has been taken." A flight attendant walked up and whispered something to him. Dawson nodded. "For those wondering, Heather has been terminated from her position effective immediately. This is not how we treat our passengers." The cabin erupted into applause. Passengers cheered, while Marcus sat in stunned silence. Heather never returned. Another flight attendant, much kinder, took over. She offered Marcus a complimentary upgrade to the executive lounge upon landing and extra perks for the inconvenience. As the plane took off, Marcus exhaled, still processing what had happened. He looked around, saw passengers smiling at him, and felt something he hadn't always felt in these situations: justice. When the plane landed in LA, Marcus received an official apology from the airline's CEO and a promise for better diversity training. His story went viral, sparking a nationwide conversation about racism in the airline industry. She walked off the plane in disgrace, jobless, and humiliated, realizing that in just 3 minutes, she had destroyed her entire career. As the plane touched down in Los Angeles, Marcus remained in his seat for a moment, collecting his thoughts. The incident had been humiliating, frustrating and unnecessary, but at least it had been resolved in his favor. As he stood to retrieve his bag, the woman in seat 3B, the businesswoman who had defended him, tapped his shoulder. "You handled that well," she said. "I'm Gabrielle, and for what it's worth, that was disgusting behavior on her part." "Thanks, Gabrielle," Marcus said, shaking her hand. "I appreciate you speaking up." "I'm just glad they fired her," Gabrielle added. "People like that don't deserve to be in customer service." As they exited the plane, Marcus noticed several passengers nodding at him, offering supportive smiles. It was a stark contrast to how things had started. At the baggage claim, Marcus's phone buzzed. The email, personally signed by the CEO, apologized for the incident and assured him that diversity and sensitivity training would be reinforced among the airline's staff. It also offered him a full refund on his ticket and a free first-class flight voucher for his next trip. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. The airline was clearly in damage control mode, but at least they were acknowledging the problem. The video of the incident, recorded by multiple passengers, had already made its way onto social media. By the time Marcus arrived at his hotel, it had gone viral under hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and #NoRoomForRacism. Major news outlets picked it up, and soon Marcus was getting requests for interviews. He wasn't sure he wanted the attention, but he also knew that speaking out could help others. That night, he received a text from an unknown number. Unknown. "Mr. Allen, I was on your flight today. Just wanted to say I support you. That flight attendant deserved to be fired. If you ever need legal representation, let me know." Marcus replied, "Thanks, but I think justice has already been served." The number texted back, "Maybe, but I think this is bigger than just one flight attendant." Meanwhile, Heather Collins was having the worst night of her life. Fired on the spot, she had to book her own flight back home, ironically in economy class. The humiliation was unbearable. As soon as she landed, she checked her phone and gasped. Her name was everywhere. Social media was tearing her apart. Former passengers shared their negative experiences with her, exposing a pattern of rudeness and entitlement. Then came the worst part. Her employer released a statement. "West Sky Airlines does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. The flight attendant involved has been terminated, and we are taking steps to ensure this never happens again." Her career in aviation was over. No airline would hire her after this. She tried to defend herself in an online post, claiming Marcus had been difficult and that she wasn't racist. But the internet wasn't buying it. Difficult? He was literally sitting in his assigned seat. If he were white, you wouldn't have questioned him. Her world crumbled. She deleted her social media, but the damage was done. A week later, Marcus sat in a TV studio preparing for an interview. The host smiled at him. "So, Marcus, your story has sparked a national conversation. What do you think needs to change?" Marcus adjusted his mic. "I think this is bigger than me. I was lucky that someone with authority was on my flight. But what if he wasn't? What if no one recorded it? Incidents like this happen every day to people who don't have a viral video to prove it. Do you think the airline's response was enough?" Marcus thought for a moment. They did the right thing by firing her, but this isn't about one person. It's about a system that allows this kind of bias to exist in the first place. Airlines need better training, better policies, and real consequences for discrimination.